Expected today, all 8 statewide elected officials, plus the guest that's joining me now, Speaker of the House, Philip Gunn. Mr. Gunn, thank you for being here.
Thank you, sir. Good morning. Glad to be here. Appreciate you having me on.
What is going on in your world?
Well, starting the day out with you. I mean, does it get any better than that? Get to start the day out talking to you.
You'd have to talk to my wife, and she'd probably, if she was honest, tell you that it probably could get better.
Yeah.
There are probably some other things that
she has to wake up to that every morning.
Every single morning.
Do you tell her the opinions that you tell the rest of us all the time?
Yeah, no, I just preserve those for radio.
I got you.
And when I'm talking to bigwig politicos,
all right,
like you.
There you go.
How are you?
Well, we are in the process of getting ready for the next session and this is the time of the year when you start gearing up for January. Looking forward to the hobnob thing today. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the accomplishments we had last year that line up with MEC and their agenda, primarily workforce development. One of the big bills we passed last year was House Bill 1388. I want to commend Donnie Bell, who is my chairman of Workforce Development, and Ryan Miller, who is the head of the Office of Workforce Development. The two of them, well, you may recall that a couple of years ago, maybe 3 years ago now, we attempted to pass a number of workforce development bills. I had hosted a summit back in the fall of, must have been 19 maybe, that focused on workforce development, and we view that as a vital key to the prosperity of our state. We've got to create jobs. We've got to have workforce, an educated, qualified workforce. I had the privilege last summer of talking to an individual whose job is to go around the nation and find sites for companies. He's a site selector. And I asked him, just as a matter of curiosity, tell me what's the number one thing you look for? When you're looking to put a company in a place, what's the number one thing you look for? And without missing a beat, he said workforce. You got to have qualified, educated, reliable workforce. You don't even get on the radar screen if you can't answer that question and provide a good workforce. So it just kind of highlights the importance of workforce. So we started, as I said, 3 years ago, focusing on how do we improve our workforce? And we passed a number of bills, and they, as most people who follow legislation know, you usually don't get anything passed in the first year. It always has to be tweaked and modified. So last year, or prior to last session, I sat down with Ryan Miller and Donnie Bell, and I said, here's the bill we've drafted. Take this, Ryan, and tweak it and change it, and let's come forward with something that's going to work. And that resulted in what's now House Bill 1388. And we, in that bill, provided for career coaches in the middle schools and the high schools who sit and meet with students and tell them about career technical education opportunities. We, in that bill, also provided for a number of other alignment between community colleges and the Department of Education to do dual enrollment classes. There's a number of things within that bill that emphasize and highlight career technical education. And that's kind of being hailed as model legislation now across the country because we have devoted ourselves to focusing on career technical education. And that is something MEC has been really big on. And I think that bill is going to hopefully result in transformation of our career technical education system. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit. I'm also going to talk about the successes we've had in education over the last 10 years. I want to commend Richard Bennett, my chairman of education, for leading out on so many positives that have occurred in the arena of education. That too is part of career technical training and job creation in Mississippi. We've got to have a strong K-12 educational system. We have had significant increase in our graduation rate. We were significantly behind the national average probably 8-10 years ago. Since then, we now have we've moved up to the national average. So that's a phenomenal development. We have third grade reading gate, which has improved our third grade reading scores. Prior to the passage of that bill, I think 69% of third graders could read like third graders. So we passed a bill that said you got to be able to read on third grade reading level before you can go to the fourth grade. Well, you would have thought the world was coming to an end. There was wailing and gnashing of teeth, and How dare we expect a third grader to read like a third grader? Well, all you had to do is raise the bar of expectation. And after 3 or 4 years, we went from a 69% third grade reading level to a 93% reading level. That has transformed our educational system. Last year, maybe 2 years ago now, we were number one in the nation for improvement in our fourth grade reading and math score. So all of these things are things that have worked to make position Mississippi to be more competitive in attracting jobs and industry. And as you know, last year we passed the largest teacher pay raise in the history of the state. That was a direct result of the efforts of Richard Bennett, Kevin Felser, Kent McCarty, and Jansen Owen in my chamber, who developed that bill. So given that they only give me 10 minutes to talk, that's probably going to take up all of my 10 minutes.
I can see that taking 10 minutes. It's a lot of stuff.
But those are things that I'm going to talk about. And I'm also going to talk about last session if I have time. I'm going to talk about the last session and just what a historic session it was. I recall one of our media outlets wrote an article on January the 4th last year, kind of a sarcastic article saying, can Republicans get all these things done? And he listed out about 7 or 8 major items. Anybody who follows legislation knows, because we meet for 3 months, if you take on one major policy item and get it done, you'd call that a success, because any of these things could expend a lot of political capital and time, and so this article, questioned whether we could get redistricting done, spend the ARPA funds, do teacher pay, do income tax, do medical marijuana, do the broadband deployment. It had about 7 or 8 things listed, any of which could have taken an entire session. Not only did we do one of those items, we did about 12. We did about 12 major pieces of legislation. And so that is a historic session. We did broadband deployment. We did medical marijuana, teacher pay raise, tax cut, largest tax cut in the history of the state, which you personally were an integral part of making happen. You came to the Jackson, you testified. We appreciate that. Gerard Gibbert, another one of your stars on SuperTalk, came and testified. We had people from all over the nation who came and talked about. And I will tell you this, Russ, during the off season, I have traveled to many conventions around the country. And that has been, I had no idea how many people were watching the state of Mississippi on the internet.
Oh, it's incredible.
It has become the topic of conversation for those who look at that sort of stuff. And Mississippi led out on that, and I had no idea how many people were following us nationally on that.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. It's interesting. I said earlier this morning that I've been following politics for a long time, and I've been watching Mississippi government for a long time. The last 3 years are the most active 3-year period that I could ever think of in Mississippi politics, both in terms of the challenges that you guys have had to face, whether it's a prison crisis or COVID or whatever it is, and then just the tremendous amount of big-ticket items that have been taken on. And I will tell you on the tax thing, in my world, which is, public policy nerds that get together and talk about these things, what happened in Mississippi is a really big deal. And it's viewed as a really good step in a direction towards income tax elimination, which I know was something that was driving you from the very beginning of this conversation, and in some ways dating all the way back to some of the conversations that were happening in 2015 and 16 around good tax reform in Mississippi. What is, in your mind, the next step? Because you had this big win last year, and it really was your passion project, if you will. What's next?
As far as the income tax?
Or next policy hurdle or horizon that you see?
Well, we want to continue to push that forward. We got a huge step in the right direction with the largest tax cut in history last year, but we didn't get all the way to full elimination, and I think that's achievable. I think we need to continue in the years to come to pursue that as a goal. Obviously, the big question that people have is how do you replace that revenue? Well, I'm not opposed to cutting government. I mean, that is one option. You don't have to replace all the revenue.
Now you're starting to sound like one of those conservatives.
You can reduce the size of government as one option too. But there will be, people who, as anybody who follows the legislation knows, you got to get the votes for that, and I'm not sure we can always get the votes for that. But we need to explore ways to try to continue to push for the elimination of the income tax. That, along with workforce development, positions us to be very competitive in attracting jobs and industry in Mississippi.
We've been speaking with Speaker Gunn. Speaker Gunn will be addressing the Hobnob a little later today. If you want to get down here, there's still an opportunity.